Welcome to another tutorial as brought to you by the Learn It channel. In this tutorial, you are going to learn the fundamentals as to how you can model and assemble this shed. So who is this tutorial for then? It's everyone who would like to improve with their skills in multi-component assemblies, workflow, component management, etc. It's a really fun project that will teach you fundamental to advanced skills that I think most, if not all of you who watch our channel will benefit from. So let's dive into it. So the very first thing we're going to do is open up a new project and we're going to save it. And for this particular tutorial, we are going to rename it our shed tutorial. Now, one of the very first things that I always teach my students to do is we have to think about, well, what are we actually going to make here? Are we going to make individual components? Are we going to make assemblies? Are we going to make sub-assemblies? Like, what are we going to do? So if we look at our sample shed here, the one that I practiced on, you can see in our browser that we have several sub-assemblies. So we have our master assembly here, but we also have our floor sub-assembly, wall front, wall rear, wall right, roof, and wall left. So these are things that we can envision. We can think about ahead of time about the basic elements of our assembly and create those components. And we call them components because we have to create them first as components. And as we add components within them, they become assemblies. But we think about those individual sub-assemblies well in advance of our project. Well, as far in advance as possible. So let's do that. We're going to click on our shed here and we're going to right click and call up a new component. And let's call this our floor. And now we can think about our right wall and go down the list. So for the visually astute out there, you might notice that we don't have a left wall created. And that's because, well, when we look at our sample shed here, the right wall is exactly the same as the left wall. However, it is mirrored. And so part of this tutorial is you're going to learn when is it that you use copy and paste components. When is it that you use copy and paste new components? When is it that you should use the rectangular pattern or circular pattern? And when is it that you should mirror? Well, the right and the left walls are an example of mirroring, and we will get to that eventually. But let's first of all start off with our floor. So once we've created all of our components, and remember, this is just as an example, if we are to create a new component after we've created one here, and we're going to call this, let's just call it left wall for fun. Well, look at where it has been placed. It's placed in our roof assembly now. So we don't want to do that. We always want to make sure when we create a new component, what I like to do is right click on our master or primary assembly and create a new component from there. That way it will create all of our sub-assemblies in the correct umbrella or the correct structure. So once we've created all of our sub-assemblies that we can think about, let's activate our floor. And we can expand that in our browser as well. So the next thing that we need to think of are the primary components within this subassembly. So what can we think of? Well, let's just look at our shed here. I'm going to isolate. Oh, we've got to isolate it now. There we go. So if we look at this, what do we have? Well, we've got our runner. We've got our rim board. We've got our joist. We've got plywood, and we've got a concrete block. So all of these things make up our individual subassembly as our floor. So why don't we make those, and all we have to do is make one at a time. So within our floor, we're going to right click now and create a new component. So for this, let's create our runner first of all. And now this shed is going to be 12 feet wide by 8 feet deep. So if we create our runner, and we can really make it on any plane that we want because we're going to assemble these individual parts later on. So let's create it on our YZ plane, and I'm just going to simply create a 4x4. So for those who don't know imperial measurements, a 4x4 is actually 3.5 by 3.5, and that's because they have been milled down from their original dimensions of 4x4. A 1/4 inch is taken off of both sides to make them 3.5 by 3.5. So anyways, there we go. Not to confuse you anymore with imperial measurements, but there we go. So our distance here is going to be 12 feet, and we're going to multiply that by 12 inches. And what I like to do, you don't have to do this, but I'm going to go symmetric, and then I'm going to go whole length. So this is actually 144 inches, and you can see that's the measurement right there. So let's go OK. And within our runner, we now have our body and our sketch. Our timeline is very simple. Let's hide our runner. Now let's create a new component, and we're going to call this our rim board. So within our rim board, we can create a sketch, and I'm going to do it on, well, let's do this face as well, or that plane, I should say. And this is going to be 1.5 by 5.5 inches tall. It's a 2 by 6. So we're going to extrude that as well. Let's go symmetric and go 12 inches times 12 feet as well. And we can make sure to go whole length. So remember, if we go half length, this is double the length. It's 144 on this side, 144 on that side, but we want to go whole length. And there we have it. So look at that. Our rim board is now done as well. Let's hide that. Now let's create another component. And what can we think of here? Let's create our joists. So our joists are actually, and we can create them on our XZ plane. And let's create our center rectangle. This is going to be a 2 by 6 as well. So I'm going to go 1.5 by 5.5. And this is going to be, so if we want to do the calculation here, we can. It's very simple. Let's just go symmetric, whole length, and now type in our equation. So we want, it's going to be 8 feet long, so 8 times 12. And then we want to minus the rim board width for the front and the back. So we want to minus 1.5 times 2. There we go. So this is going to be our joist. We can hide that. Now, what do we want to do? Well, let's create our plywood. This is great. Okay, we're going to call this our plywood and create our sketch on our XY plane. Create ourselves a center rectangle of 96 by 48 inches. Now this is probably one of the only parameters that I'm going to include is the thickness of our plywood. So let's do that. And we can just call this plywood thickness. And we're going to call this 5/8 of an inch. There we have it. And we can just extrude this now to our parameter plywood thickness. There we go, 5/8 of an inch. So we can hide our plywood. What else do we need to create? Well, our concrete block. So we can create another component. And now our concrete block, I'll just do it on the XY plane there. And why don't we call it a 12 by 12 concrete block. And this is going to be 6 inches thick. It's going to be pretty beefy. There we have it. Oh, so I didn't rename this, but now we can just single click it and click it again. And then we can call this our concrete block. There we have it. So we've got all of our different components. They're all floating on top of each other. And remember, most of them are transparent because we've activated our concrete block. So now we want to activate our entire subassembly, our floor assembly. And there's all our parts. They're floating within one another. But this is the fun part. This is the Lego for adults, you might say, where we can assemble everything. Or you might say our Tetris for adults. So any of you who have mastered Tetris growing up, well, this is your ball game right here. And we're going to have fun assembling our floor together right now. So what should we start off with? Well, I would probably, and this is all up to you, I would want to probably start off with something that makes most sense to me. And for me, I think that the rim board is what makes most sense. So the rim board, if we go back to our practice shed here, and we can unisolate that. Let's just isolate our floor. Our rim boards are the one in the front and the one in the back here, and our joists hang between those. Now, I just want to make this clear. I am not a carpenter. I'm a machinist. I started machining when I was 12 years old, and I started programming at 15 years old. However, I have been working in many different fields, and I have built sheds. I've put together kitchens before, and so I have some experience with woodworking. If I have labeled any of these parts wrongly, please don't give the thumbs down. Please give a thumbs up. put the right naming convention down in the comments below. Tell me where I've gone wrong, and hopefully I could make it up to you. But this is again a tutorial that's teaching you proper assembly, proper workflow, how to assemble things together, and to end up coming up with a product that you're happy with and that you can make a bill of materials later on. You can calculate weight if you need to. You can visualize everything. You can make sure that it's going to go together just the way you want. So what I'm thinking of are these rim boards right here. So I'm going to start off with this first rim board, and I want to join it. And this is where you're going to have to get used to joining properly. And so I want to stress this right from the beginning. I won't mention it again. We pick the face that we want to find our snap point on, and we're going to select the face first. It turns blue. And now no matter what I do, I can try and pick another snap point on another face, and it won't allow me because I've selected that face first. So now I want to pick this particular snap point, and what do I want it to snap to? Well, I'm going to turn on my master origin, and I can actually snap it to that particular location. And now I'm going to bring this out, and it's going to be half of 8 feet. So I'm going to go minus 48 inches, and there we have it. So this master origin will not move. That's the good thing about using that. Don't use the origin within the subassembly. Use it for the master origin. And that way it will keep everything buttoned down to a location that you know will never move. So let's hide that origin now. And now what do? Well, some of us might be tempted to mirror this rim board to the other side. Now, why do we not want to mirror it? Well, let me show you by going to our design and go to our drawing workspace. Within our drawing workspace here, we can see, well, I'll just go to that view just for fun. Let's go OK. We've got, and I will just toggle those particular parts of the subassemblies off right now. We're not even using them. But here we've got one board. And if I create a bill of materials real quick, a parts list, here we have item 2. We have an item before it in our design. So it's saying that we have a quantity of 1, and it's our rim board. Well, look at this. If we go back, and I'm just going to save this as well. If we go back to our file, and we are going to mirror this. Let's look what happens here. We're going to mirror it off of that plane. So this is perfect. And if we want to see the dimension in between the two of them, I'm going to pick that face. I'm going to spin around, hold down Shift or Control or Command on a Mac, and look it down here. The distance between the two is 96 inches. So this is perfect. We've got 2 components. This is looking great. Well, what's the problem? I'm going to save this, and let's go back to our drawing and see how it affects our drawing. We are going to update our version. Now we've got 2 rim boards, but what's our quantity? We only got 1 as a quantity. Now, some of you also who know how to operate Fusion, we can see in our timeline here that we've actually mirrored our bodies, but we could actually, let's go back here. Sorry, I can actually mirror as a component, and let's see what will happen here too. Let's save it. Let's update that, and look at what we have in our parts list. We've got 1 quantity for our rim board, and 1 is our quantity for our rim board mirror. Well, we don't want this in our parts list. We don't want to give this to somebody at the home center and say, well, I need a rim board and a rim board mirror, a quantity of 1 each, when they're the exact same component. So that's just showing you that we don't use mirror in this instance when it's the exact same shape, size, orientation, all of it is the exact same. We do not use mirror. So let's undo that. So what we're going to do here is right click on rim board, copy, and then paste within floor. Now we can remember these shortcuts. This is the command button on a Mac. It will say control on a Windows computer. But we want to paste it. And now look what we've got. Rim board 2. We're just going to move that over. And I can join this to anything I want. I can join it to the origin, or I can join it to this other rim board. But look what I'm going to do. I'm going to select that as well, and move this over 48 inches. And there we have it. So rim board 1, rim board 2, because I've copied and pasted, don't select paste new, we'll do that later on. Because I've done that, now let's see what our bill of materials looks like, or our parts list. There we have it. So our rim board, there's only one item, but our quantity is 2. So this will keep our parts list under control and much easier to work with in the future. So let's go back to our shed and we're going to go to our next step. Let's hide the origin. Now probably what I would do is start hanging the joists. So here, I'm just going to move that joist off to the side and we can start joining. So here you will have to get used to how to join or which parts of the individual components you want to join, but I am going to keep it as a standard. I'm going to join all my parts, if I can, to our front rim board. So let's select this top corner and remember the formula in Fusion, this to that, this to that. We don't say in English that to this, do we? And we say this to that. So move this part to that. And we can select that point right there. And there we have it. So our joist is now hanging in between our two rim boards, no problem. So at this point, this is really cool because we can go to our rectangular pattern and select components as our object type. If we select bodies, we're going to be in trouble. It's not going to work out for us. So make sure if we're creating a pattern for components, well, we select components. So select our joist. And remember, if we can't select this directly, if there's a bunch of different parts, we can always select it in our browser. Pick our axis. We're going to move our arrow over. And let's go extent. This is going to go all the way to -144. And you can see it's actually hanging off the end of our rim board. So we're going to have to add the thickness of our 2x6, which is 1.5 inches. There we go. But we only have 3. Well, let's go back to our pattern and we're actually going to calculate this. So it's 12 feet long where they need to be 12 inches on center. So 12 divided by, or 144 divided by 12 equals 12. Let's go 12 here. And let's see our first error. We can see what they are on centers by clicking the side, holding down shift, clicking the other side, and it's actually 13 inches. That's a big no-no for trying to put down a slice of plywood. So we actually have to go back and add an additional one. It's actually, if we count the spaces, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 spaces. We need 12 spaces. So we actually have to add another one. Now let's see our on-center distance. Hey, there we go, 11.875. Spot on. We can lay down the plywood and fasten it without issue right now. Now, as you can see, because we have patterned our components, now we have 13 joists in our subassembly. Again, if we save this and go back to our drawing and update it, look what we have. We've got 12 joists. So this is perfect. This is how we want our bill of materials to look. Great. So now we've got all our joists in the right position. What would we want to do now? Well, let's do our runner. So I'm going to make my runner visible. And again, we can just drag this down below. You can see as soon as I drag it, this position menu shows up here. So I can go revert and that disappears. As soon as I move it, it will pop up there. So I can either capture it or revert. I don't want to capture it because that adds another item to the timeline. But at this point, we can just joint it to our floor. So I'm going to pick that corner right there and go below here and pick that corner. Perfect. Now I don't know exactly what the overhang is supposed to be here, but I'm just going to bring this in 8 inches. And we could actually create another formula at this point or parameter. So we can say runner overhang, right? Let's call it 8 inches. Perfect. Can go back to our joint. And we're going to call this negative overhang. Perfect. Now the same thing on the other side. We're going to click on our runner, right click, copy, paste. Don't do paste new. We can just move this off to the side. we're going to join it underneath to that location. Perfect. And we can apply this parameter once again. And we can go to our runner overhang. There we go. So if we don't like that particular overhang with our design, let's just change it. There we go, 20 inches. You can see it adjust. Let's go 40 inches. Well, clearly that's not going to work for us. We can go 5 inches if we want, but let's just go 8 inches. Again, if you know how much the overhang is supposed to be in this instance, put it down in the comments below. We'd love to hear from you. Okay, so that's our runners. Now let's go to our concrete block. I'm just going to bring this on down to the bottom there, and we can join it. I'm going to join this to that. Perfect. Alrighty, so our concrete block is down there. Now this is a really cool thing about Fusion. We can go duplicate with joints, and it's going to say, okay, what components do you want? Well, we're going to select that component, and then we just select our snap point. So let's go over here and select that snap point, puts it right in the right location. We can just snap again. It's just in snap mode right now. There we go. Perfect. So the only thing is that if we select the midpoint here, you can see that it's not the correct snap point, and that's okay. So what we can actually do, you can see these are all of our joints down here. And our last two, we can actually select the correct snap point there. And it's actually going to be this. This is the one that we're working with. Sorry, there we go. We're just going to hold down Command or Control, select our midpoint. There we go. And we can do the same thing for, oh, we've got an error here. There, that's all right. So actually what I'm going to do is, yeah, we can just go to that and go edit joint. Perfect. And now our snap point here, let's get rid of that. And let's hide our first, since this is our first block, I'm just going to hide that in our browser. And now I should be able to select the midpoint there, and it shouldn't bring up an error there. That's what we want to see. And we can do the same thing over with this one. I'm going to select that joint, right click, edit joint, get rid of our first snap point. It's going to send it back to its home position. And I'm going to pick the midpoint. That's going to slide on over there. Now, where's our first concrete block? Well, we've hidden it over here. So there we go. Those are all our concrete blocks, all in order. Perfect. Last but not least, we've got our plywood. So we're just going to, okay, we're going to get to that issue in a second. So we can single click on our plywood, and now we can move it. And I am going to join it on the bottom, that snap point, to this guy right here. Boom. Perfecto. Excellent. That's exactly what we want. And once again, we can go to our rectangular pattern, select components, make sure our plywood is selected. Our axis is going to be our x-axis, and we're going to move this over. So we don't need to do a extent here. We can go to spacing, and we know the width of our plywood, which is 48. And there we go, quantity of 3. If we go 4, we've got an extra piece hanging off the end there, but we only want to go 3. And would you look at that? Our flooring is all done. So let's save it. Now let's just talk one moment here before we move on about proper naming conventions. So again, we're going to take this drawing. We're going to take this particular drawing that we're making in progress right now. We're going to take this to our home center. We're going to give it to the home center people, and they are going to help us out. So we've got one runner right now, rim board, joist, plywood. So I wonder why that is all messing up on us. Runner 2 should be in there. Okay, well, we'll get to that in a moment, but we want to take this and give it to somebody at the home center, and they can show us where to find all of these different components of our shed. So it's good to name it or rename it at this point so we know exactly what to find. So let's just go to our runner, and we're going to isolate it. And our runner is again 4x4 by 12 feet long. So what I'd like to do is just put that in the beginning or the front, the prefix of our name. So 4x4 by 144 inches long, or we could call it 12 feet long. And as we do that, look what happens to our other runner name. well, it updates correspondingly. So I'm going to do that for all of these, and we're going to go a little bit quick with the video so you don't have to see me do this all. So let's just go unisolate and adjust these correspondingly. And again, to find the total length, just click on an edge that you want to see the total length, and there it is, 144. Great, so all of our items here have been updated except for the concrete blocks. I don't know exactly what the home center has for the size of the concrete blocks, so we're just going to leave that. Now, before we move on, we're going to talk about how to apply appearances and apply material properties. But just before we move on, I just wanted to send out a special request. If you're benefiting from this tutorial at all, it takes no time for you at all to thumbs up. Please consider giving us a like. It really helps out our channel to send this video out into the YouTube world and help to spread what we do here at the Learn It channel. We're a small channel, but we would love to try and do this a little bit more. If you love our channel, please consider becoming a YouTube member. You can see that in the description below, a link how to become a YouTube member or a Patreon member. Consider buying us a coffee too. Any little way like this would really help out our channel, and we thank you immensely for your help ahead of time for actually considering this. So let's continue on. Let's go to our material properties right now. So if we go to our runner and go to physical material, you can see that the default material is steel. So if we go to right click and properties, well, how much is our 4x4 going to weigh here? What's the mass, I should say? Well, we've got 8,000 ounce mass. Well, if we want an actual real reading here, let's save this, or a measurement, I should say. Let's save that. Go to our drawing. We're going to double click our drawing and let's turn on mass. And we can actually, within our mass here, I believe, yeah, with our units, we can change this to kilograms. So our runners are 226 kilograms, a little overkill. So we need to change our physical material to wood. And we're going to drag and drop a pine here. So we actually want to apply this to everything. Let's go and just encapsulate everything there and drag and drop pine. And there we have it. So this will change our physical material. If you change the appearance, it will look exactly the same, but the mass will still be showing up as being steel. So if we want to have a total weight of everything, make sure that we go to physical material and apply a particular material to our design. Now, obviously, we don't want to do this with the concrete block. So let's just go right click physical material on the concrete block. And I'm going to hold down Command, select all our other blocks. And this, we don't actually have concrete, we have stone, and I'm just going to apply field stone to it. And let's remove our wood properties. So now it's field stone. And now at this point, we can press A to go to our appearance and type in concrete. And there we have it. So again, we can select our concrete block, all of them, by holding down Command or Control, dragging and dropping concrete. So now it looks a little bit more like concrete and our entire floor is done. Perfect. Let's go save. Now, next step, let's go to our rear wall. So we're going to do this and we're going to lather, rinse, and repeat with the exact same methods that we just used for the floor, but we can hide our floor now. We can expand our rear wall and start creating new components for all the components that we know that will be part of the rear wall. So we can create a new component, calling it our sole or top plate. Next, our studs. We're just going to call it stud. And then lastly, we're going to create our filler blocks. And again, let's not create it as plural. Let's make it singular. There we go. So let's activate our sole top plate and just create one at a time. So again, I'm going to pick the Y-X axis there, or plane, I should say. And this is going to be 1.5 by 3.5. Perfect. And when we hit extrude, again, it selects it by default. So we're going to go symmetric. And this is going to be 144 inches long. Perfect. Now our studs here, we're going to pick our, well, we can pick the same YZ plane. And here we're going to call this, well, this is going to be, I believe, 88 inches. And we can call that 3.5. And let's just make sure for a moment here. Okay, let's just go here to our distance of 1.5. And it's actually supposed to be 7 foot 8 inches and a half. 7 foot 8 inches and a half tall. So this is, we're going to have the sole plate and 2 top plates. So what's this? Let me just do the math here. Yes, it is 88 inches spot on. So that's our stud. And then our filler blocks, let's just go there. And this guy we can create on the same plane. Go to our origin. This is going to be just 12 inches tall, 3.5. Perfect. And let's extrude that as well. Symmetric, whole length, distance 3.5. Oh, no, that's a little bit too much. We want to go 1.5. There we have it. So we only have 3 components for our whole back wall. So let's go to our, let's activate all of it, and we're going to move this stud off to the side, and let's start assembling. Perfect. Once we've got that, we can rectangular pattern. So remember, object type components, that's what we want. Select our axis. Now, why would I not want to select the actual part of our sole plate here, or our individual component? Why would I rather select part of our origin? Well, our origin never moves. So our sole plate we might change it later on, and that would totally throw off everything if we're to start basing it off of an individual component rather than our main origin. So here we go. We're going to go to extent again, and this is going to be minus 144 plus 1.5. There we have it. And how many quantity? Well, we want 13 again. And this should be 12 inches on center. That's it. Awesome. Now we want to add 2 top plates up here. So we can just click on that and right click copy. Now the shortcut, Command or Control V. Go OK, do it again. We're going to add 2. Now just select 1 and you can see it turns up in blue. Now we can drag it to the top, select the next one, drag it to the top, and there we have it. So here we can take these guys and we can assemble them to our wall. That's it. Now we also have to change these studs a little bit. We have to add 2 more. Paste. I'm just going to move that over. It's a little easier to work with. And we can do the same thing over here. Stud 13. Copy and paste. There we have it. And I am going to join. I can just do the mid to the midpoint here if I want. And move this over 1.5. Oop. Let's go back to that. I think I only went 1 inches. Yep. There we go. So 1.5. And we can do the same thing over here. Select that midpoint and this midpoint. Again, it doesn't really matter the snap point. If we keep a regular process or a standard, we might say, it makes it easier later on, but something that easy, we can just pick the midpoint and call it a day. So now I'm going to move that filler block over, and we're going to join this up as well. Perfect. And what I'm going to do is select that. We're going to copy and Command V. There we go. Let's just move that on down. And I'll show you a little secret here. It saves us a little bit of time. I'm going to pick that snap point and right there as well. Perfect. Now we can actually rectangular pattern components, and we can pick both of those. We can pick that filler, this filler. Now select our axis. And again, we want to, let's hide our studs here. Pick that one, perfect. And let's just move this into place. Now if it's 88 inches tall, let's move this over and up to, what would this be? 76. And we've got 3. There we go. And it will add everything in our browser here in order. We've got filler block 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's it. And we can make those active or visible. So now we've got our back wall here, and let's save it. And again, at this point, I'd like to rename these components. This is 144 inches. So the sole or the top plate is going to be a 2x4 by 12 feet. And why don't we call it 12 feet? It will update all of them. Our stud, how tall is the stud here? 88 inches. So we can go to any stud actually. It doesn't really matter. They're all copies of each other. So 2x4 by 88 inches. And it will update all of them. And our filler block is 2x4 by 12 inches. And that's our entire wall. Now, you might take note that if we move our stud off to the side, we don't want it to do that. We want everything to move in unison. So what we do here is we're going to envelop everything and go to assemble and create a rigid group. And it's saying, yeah, there's already constraint there, but we want to add another one. That's perfect. Now, if we move our wall, everything moves together. Let's revert position. And now what we can do too is go to right click, physical material. We're going to select everything and apply the pine. And there we have it. We've got our pine look and properties all applied at once. So we actually have to go back to our floor right now. And we can activate that and let's isolate it. And here we're actually going to create a rigid group as well. So let's do that. Yes, and now everything is joined together. We can click it and we can't move anything because they're all joined together. Now let's go to our rear wall, make that visible. We'll activate our primary assembly, move this off to the side. Now you can see all the joints are visible here. So I'm just going to turn those off. Go to our floor joints, to our rear wall joints, turn them all off, make them invisible, just so we can keep our sanity. And we can join, remember this to that. We want to move our back wall to something that isn't moving. We want to move it to that, which is, I picked the wrong one. There we go. And we want to pick our plywood. And here, when we're selecting joints, if it's a subassembly and it's got all these different components, it will only move the one that we've selected until we hit OK, and then it will drag and drop everything into place right there. So what do we have here? We've got the beginnings of our shed. We've got the floor completed. We've got the back wall completed. If you have benefited from this tutorial at all, please again consider liking. It would mean the world to us if you were to do that and show your support. And again, if you'd like to consider becoming a member, that would be great. One last thing before we go, you might recognize that I am just spinning this model around in space very easily. I use a 3D Connection Space Mouse Pro. If you're interested in buying one, see a link in the description below. So now, before we close up this tutorial, if you want to see how to make the right and left walls, the front wall, the roof, all of the details to finish this shed, how to do a bill of materials, how to do all the drawings properly so that we can just print it off, go to our home center, get all these supplies for us to make our shed or our home or whatever the need may be. If you want to see those tutorials, please comment in the comments below. Please consider liking. Let us know anything else, if we've missed anything or anything else you want to see in the future. Would you like to see renders of this? How to create good renders? Well, put that in the comments below. Thanks so much again for joining the Learn It channel. Hope to see you at the next tutorial. If there are enough likes, if there's enough interest out there, well, then you will see that there is a secondary tutorial or a string of tutorials that are connected to this one that will describe how to finish off the rest of our shed and all of those other aspects, the bill of materials, etc. So you'll see that on your screen at the end of this tutorial. But if not, please smash that like button. And thanks again for tuning into the Learn It channel. Hope to see you at the next tutorial.